Hi everyone, this is Dr. Shu coming to you with our virtual class notes for week 5. I appreciate your flexibility. I'm sorry that I can't meet with you this week. If it's Saturday, I probably am either on my way or already in Italy, and so hopefully enjoying myself, and hopefully you're enjoying the chance to have a break from class this week. So we do have some notes to review though, and this week we're talking about Chapter 7 and Chapter 8. So if you take a look at the slides, and these lectures will follow along with the slides, of course in our agenda we'll separately discuss previous assignments, the exam, HR Application 4, and the discussion posts and who our discussant of the week is. We'll talk about some new business, which is Chapter 8 on recruitment, and Chapter 7 on recruitment, Chapter 8 on selection, and you'll be able to see a series of video lectures. This is the first of those. And then there'll be a final video lecture with information about the assignments that are due before we meet again. As you can see, we have a short email response, which you should have received your case study on Wednesday, March 8th. Your e-slip is due by the 15th. Your short email response is due by the 12th. Your HR app is due as usual by the 18th, which is a week from Saturday. And then discussion posts are due as usual again as well. First post by Wednesday the 15th, second or more posts by Wednesday the 22nd. So we'll get to the old business on a different lecture. You can take a look at that one, but we will break right into, on this recording, the recruitment chapter, and Chapter 7 on recruitment. And if you look at the third slide, I have an example of a job ad there for you. It was found on Craigslist, and that's probably obvious from the quality of the ad. Are you qualified in HR? Then chances are you have the skills necessary to succeed in our business. Communicating well with people will put you over the top, and so on. And as you can see, it's full of spelling errors and all kinds of braggadocious language. $1 trillion recession-proof industry sounds great to me, right? It doesn't really say specifically what kinds of skills it's looking for, even what the title of the job is, or how to apply, etc. And so this is something that's pretty concerning and a pretty bad recruiting ad. All right, we'll talk about some of the important facets of recruiting, and giving what we call a realistic job preview is probably the most important thing that you can do to be a good recruiter. But also important is being on message with your recruiting ads. Make sure you're reading your chapter. The chapter doesn't talk too much about this, but it's an important point. And that is, when you create an ad, message is important, and the style of message you use is important. Is your message realistic? In other words, does it tell job applicants what to expect from the job? Realistically, honestly, good and bad, warts and all. Branded means, is it something that you're relying on the fame and people's understanding of what your company is about to make them want to apply, right? Google, hey, we're Google, come work for us. You know, people have an impression of what that company's about just from their marketing and their branding and everything that they do. Same for Amazon. Or Zappos or Southwest, right? And then also you can be targeted in your message. Maybe your message is only focused on a very specific part of the population who is qualified to do that job. If it's a highly professional job, neurosurgeons, you know, you're not going to advertise on Monster. Maybe you'd advertise in trade pubs and things like that in order to get people who are qualified for those kinds of jobs. Message is important for that reason, right? Are you being honest and telling people what to expect from the job? Are you integrating your company brand into the advertising? Are you targeting somebody or a particular portion of the talent pool in your request for people to apply? And you can do one or more of these things when you create a recruiting ad. As you're probably aware, there's lots of external influences on recruitment. Certainly, recruitment is the first contact that we have with prospective employees, the first chance to make a first impression, right? The labor market is a big influence on recruitment, or how high unemployment is. Certainly, it's harder to recruit people when unemployment is low, or if there's not a large labor market in your area. You might have to increase your scope. If you're looking for, engineers in Dade City, That's not a whole lot of area to find a whole lot of engineers in the area. It's a very small area. Probably not a lot of people that have those skills. There might be a few, but if you want to expand your choices, you're going to look in the whole Tampa-St. Pete market, potentially in the whole state of Florida, potentially in the whole U.S., potentially in the whole world to find the engineers that you want to do the job. There's also a difference between passively and actively recruiting people. Some people aren't really looking for a job, but they'd take one if the right opportunity came along. Active candidates are those who are looking. I'm actively looking for a job. I want to get out of here, or I don't have a job and I want to find one. Or passive is, yeah, I'm happy where I am, but I would consider something better if somebody made me an offer. And this is where things like poaching come up, stealing employees essentially from competitors. Certainly the employer's requirements are an influence on recruitment. That's more of an internal influence, right? If you need a lot of skills to get the job done, you're going to severely limit the talent pool that you have to choose from. The candidate's preferences are certainly going to be an influence on recruitment. If you have somebody who's looking for a particular kind of company or a particular experience, if you're able to offer that, it might be a great fit. But if you're not able to offer that, don't pretend that you are, because sooner or later the candidate's going to find out that you don't offer whatever experience it is, and they're going to go elsewhere. And certainly the law has influence on recruitment. You're probably familiar with the Immigration and Reform and Control Act of 1986. And this is an interesting law because it put the onus of figuring out if people were legal to work in the U.S. on the employer rather than on the government. Before 1986, it was up to Immigration and Naturalization to find people who were in the country illegally and deport them and so on. Well, in 1986, they told employers, listen, it's up to you to make sure that your employees are legal to work in the country. We had to start filling out I-9 forms, right? You give the 2 forms of ID, the Social Security card, driver's license or picture ID or passport or whatever, to demonstrate that you're legal to work in the U.S. And if you don't have those on file, a lot of employers get dinged for that very small infraction multiple times, and it can really add up. So let's take a look at recruiting methods and alternatives. And certainly there are internal and external methods to look at, but there are also alternatives to recruiting, right? Internally, we're looking at individuals who already work for the company. There's a phenomenon called moonlighting. Are people taking on a second job essentially with the same company, or extra responsibilities? And that typically means overtime, but maybe they're doing something completely outside of their purview just to get the work done, so you don't have to hire somebody externally. Are you taking referrals from employees? Still one of the most popular ways of getting a job, at least in the U.S. An employee refers you to their company. Hey, you should come work where I work. It's great. And the idea behind that is if you have a good employee and they refer somebody, that somebody is probably going to be good as well. Of course, you wouldn't take a referral necessarily from a bad employee. And that was the issue that I had, if you recall, all the way back in week 1 when we talked about Dan, the chef at Martha's Pancake House, who wasn't a great employee and referred his friend to come in and work for her. And I kind of question whether he's going to be a great employee either. But who knows? And then, of course, the internal job board. You're basically your company website that's visible only to your company, that posts openings and gives preference maybe to internal employees first. Sometimes only internal employees are given the opportunity to apply. But that can be dangerous as well. Certainly, only hiring internally can lead to groupthink, can lead to lots of other unfortunate consequences. And maybe it's nice to get some fresh blood, some more diversity into the organization from outside. Externally, you're familiar with job postings, of course. We're moving away from the traditional print media, have been for the last 25 years, into online job boards, right? Certainly almost every company has an employment portion or page of their website. So you can go to that if you're interested in working for a particular company. Job fairs are still popular, and I meet lots of recruiters who say, "Oh, I love to go to job fairs because I love to meet people face to face and see, what they're like. I don't want to just see a soulless resume page that gets uploaded onto our company website." And while I understand why that's true, what's the first thing that a recruiter asks you to do when you come to a job fair? It's, make sure you apply online through our website. So there's still that piece, and that's still going to be part of it. Even though I appreciate that it's nice to make a personal connection. Although if it's a large job fair, I kind of have to wonder, recruiter, are you really remembering all the hundreds of people that you meet throughout the day? And I think not. What's become popular recently is special event recruiting, right? Where companies will hold games or contests or competitions or even parties, essentially, to invite people who have these job skills and ask them to participate in the game or participate in the party and kind of get to know them through that and make a decision about hiring them in that way. So it's almost like a contest in order to get hired into a job or even recruited into a job. And then, of course, headhunters are professional recruiters who go out and look for employees. And this typically is only affordable for high-level positions. You're not going to use a headhunter and hire their services if you have somebody who's an entry-level position. That's just going to be something where people are applying. A headhunter is going to find a very specialized position, a very high-level position, and fill that for you. And that's an okay way to do it. Of course, very expensive, somewhat time-consuming, and there's not always a guarantee that you'll like the candidate that the headhunter is really pushing. So that's something to consider as well. And of course, alternatives to recruiting include things like outsourcing, going and finding somebody else who can do the work. And if that makes sense from a cost perspective, that's the thing to do, right? Offering overtime to employees. Again, if that makes sense from a cost perspective and you only need it for a little while, why not offer some overtime hours rather than hiring a new employee who's going to have benefits and other perks, a place to sit, things like that. Right? And of course, if you decide you do need to hire a worker, maybe you hire a temp, maybe you hire a contract worker who can do the work and get it done. And then once the project's done, you don't have to worry about them anymore. They can go off and go on to their next project. One of the most important things to think about when you're thinking about recruiting is what we call the realistic job preview, or the RJP. And what that means is making sure the candidate has a realistic idea what the job is about, right? So often, candidates or job applicants are excited about a new job. Hey, this sounds like a great opportunity, or I want to work for this company because I've always heard such great things about you. There's branding again. But it's quite possible that their expectations can be unrealistic or too high, right? And if the recruiter doesn't do anything to dissuade them, then they're going to probably end up with a candidate who seems great and then is burned out after a few months and says, this wasn't what I expected it to be at all. Right? So in a traditional job preview, the book talks about a traditional preview. I don't know if there's such a thing as a traditional preview, but a traditional recruiting method, maybe you get the candidate's hopes up too high. You make the company sound like a great, fantastic place to work, which many companies are, but no company is all the time. Sometimes you get people who come in and then their experiences are not what they were told it was going to happen, right? And they are dissatisfied and they realize it isn't the job that they were looking for, and ultimately they leave, or they think about leaving, which is even worse, without leaving, right? And they're just surfing, LinkedIn to find a new job all day long when they should be working for you. So if you can give a realistic job preview, you're going to be a lot better off. You can make sure the person's expectations are realistic, right? You can make sure that the job is they're honest with them about what the tasks and the responsibilities of the job are, even if that means things that they don't like, that they wouldn't want to be happy doing. And it may not be something that they find attractive, but wouldn't you rather know before the candidate starts, as opposed to 6 months later when they've been hired and they're going, oh, I don't like this job at all, right? And you're going to lose some people from the process. But the idea is the people that aren't going to be good or motivated to do the job are going to self-select out, and you'll be left with only the candidates who really understand the job and are really motivated to do the job, right? So what that means is you'll have people who are more job satisfied, you'll have people whose needs are more matched to what the job is really about, and you'll have a higher what we call job survival rate. In other words, less turnover, less people quitting because they're dissatisfied, and etc. So the more you can do as a recruiter to give a realistic job preview early in the process, don't wait till the end. I wouldn't say, hey, let's do it at the very last day. Hey, congratulations, you're going to be hired. Let's show you what it's really all about. Oh my gosh, right? Why not put that in the job description? Why not put that on the video on your website, on your employment portal that says, hey, here's what the job really is, so that people understand what they're getting into. Ultimately, successful recruitment is aimed at a couple of different things, right? Reducing turnover. That's what recruitment is all about, and that's the first step in that process. Obviously, selection plays a role too, which we'll talk about in the next videos. having better job satisfied employees. And again, job satisfaction doesn't mean they're more productive, but it does mean a lot of things about them. It means they're less likely to turn over, they're less likely to come in late, they're less likely to miss days because they just hate their job, right? And just better organizational effectiveness. Again, not necessarily productivity, but certainly the organization working better, right? And one other thing to think about is don't tell people things that aren't true about the job, right? There is such a thing as what we call negligent recruiting. When you tell people, hey, listen, this is going to be the most fantastic thing. You're going to be manager in 6 months. You know, you're going to be making millions of dollars in sales, all on commission. And of course, a lot of that's probably not true, right? And if the candidate wants to, they potentially could make a case and say, listen, I was told all these things when I came, when I was recruited, and none of them actually happened. And if they have proof and they can demonstrate evidence of that, there might be a lawsuit, right? So that's something to consider as well. Make sure that your recruiters are trained and not promising more than they can deliver. Well, that's it for the recruiting part of the chapter. Tune into the next video where we'll talk about selection in chapter 8. Bye.